What if I told you a family's dream vacation turned into a nightmare? Not because of an accident, not because of bad luck, but because two police officers decided a black mother and her child didn't belong in a place meant for people like them. What if I told you that while an 8-year-old boy splashed in a pool, laughing under the summer sun, two men sworn to protect the public were already deciding how to break him? And what if I told you they didn't know the boy's father was a federal agent, someone trained to face the darkest parts of humanity, but even he wasn't prepared for the evil he was about to confront? This isn't a movie. This isn't fiction. This is a story about the kind of racism that hides in plain sight, the kind that smiles before it shoves, the kind that calls itself law enforcement while terrorizing innocent families. In the next few minutes, you're going to see how a simple vacation became a battle for survival, how a mother's scream, a child's tears, and a father's fury exposed a system built to break black families, and how one family's bravery tore the truth into the light. Before we begin, tell me where in the world you're watching from, because this story isn't just about one town. It's about a pattern, a warning, a reality millions of people live with every day. And if you believe stories like this need to be told, then subscribe right now. Not just for this video, but because tomorrow's story will hit even harder. Let's begin. And remember, stay with this one until the end, because what happens next will stay with you long after the screen goes dark. The first real sunlight of July crept into the Coleman home like a quiet blessing, warming the hardwood floors of their living room and settling in soft gold on the edges of half-zipped suitcases. Danielle Coleman stood in the middle of the room, folding a stack of Jordan's shirts with a precision she normally reserved for grading essays. Every motion was slow, measured, almost ritualistic, like if she folded each shirt perfectly enough, maybe peace would wrap itself around their family for once and stay. Her son, 9-year-old Jordan, practically vibrated beside her. He clutched a pair of bright red swim goggles, his lucky goggles, he called them, and bounced on the balls of his feet with the kind of joy only a child could summon so early in the morning. "Mom, did you pack my blue trunks already? The ones with the lightning bolts?" he asked, leaning so close to the suitcase she had to tug him back to keep him from knocking everything over. "Yes, baby," Danielle said, smoothing his hair with the palm of her hand. "They're in the front pocket. And your towel, and your sunscreen, and the flip-flops you keep pretending you lost." Jordan grinned at that, his brown eyes gleaming. "I didn't pretend I lost them. I just forgot where I put them." "Mm-hmm," Danielle murmured with a smirk. From the hallway, heavy footsteps approached, steady and slow. A moment later, Andre Coleman entered the room, tall and solid, his presence as grounding as a pillar. At 42, he carried himself like someone who had seen everything a man shouldn't have to see, his posture shaped by years in the FBI, his silence forged through cases he'd never be allowed to discuss. But this morning, something softer lived in his expression, something hopeful. He had left his badge and firearm locked in their bedroom safe, tucked behind a stack of winter sweaters. Today, he wasn't Special Agent Coleman, not a protector of the nation, not a strategist picking apart clues that kept him awake at night. Today, he wanted to be just Dad. "You two almost ready?" he asked, lifting the heaviest suitcase with one hand as though it were empty. "The road's waiting on us." Danielle's heart fluttered. He was trying, really trying, to leave the weight of the world behind. For her. For their son. For the family they kept promising themselves they'd protect, even from the things they couldn't name aloud. "Almost," she answered, though her hands trembled slightly as she zipped up the suitcase. Andre's gaze flicked to her fingers, noticing everything the way he always did. He stepped closer, looping an arm around her waist from behind. "You good?" he murmured against her ear, low and warm. It was the type of question only a man who knew her soul could ask without words. Danielle leaned into him. "I just want this to go right," she whispered. "I want Jordan to have a good memory, something bright, something that doesn't feel heavy." "It will," Andre said, placing a kiss against her temple. "This week is for us. No work, no calls, no interruptions." Across the room, Jordan made a dramatic gagging noise. "Oh," he said, scrunching up his face. "Do you guys have to do that?" Andre chuckled. "One day you'll understand." "No, I won't," Jordan declared confidently. "That's gross." Laughing, Danielle reached for the last bag and nodded toward the stairs. "Go check your room, Sweet Pea. Make sure you didn't forget anything important." Jordan sprinted away, feet pounding against the carpeted stairs. The second he was gone, Andre gently turned Danielle to face him. Her eyes held a distant tension, pain she'd never verbalized, but he felt all the same. "Hey," he said softly, brushing his thumb across her cheek. "Whatever you're worried about, we'll handle it together. This trip is the reset we all need." Danielle nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to feel the brightness Jordan felt. She wanted to forget the nights Andre came home late, face hardened by what he refused to explain. She wanted to forget the conversations with families at her school who spoke in tears about discrimination that never seemed to end. She wanted to forget the fear that sometimes lived in Jordan's eyes when he overheard news stories he was too young to understand. But for this 1 week, she wanted to try. Jordan thundered back down the stairs. "Got everything," he announced, holding up a tablet and a stuffed animal he claimed he didn't sleep with anymore, but kept close anyway. "Then let's go," Andre said. The Coleman SUV rolled out of their suburban neighborhood, tires crunching over familiar asphalt. Jordan pressed his face to the window, watching the houses melt into trees, the trees into rolling highways. Danielle played their road trip playlist, a mix of Motown classics, soft 90s R&B, and whatever upbeat song Jordan currently loved. For a while, everything felt right. Andre glanced at Danielle, her curls catching sunlight like strands of fire. She was humming along to a song they used to dance to when they first met. He reached over and squeezed her hand. She squeezed back. The trip was healing them already. 2 hours later, Jordan began asking the classic question on a loop. "Are we there yet? How much longer? Are we halfway? How many miles is halfway?" "We're close enough to stop for food," Danielle said. "How about that?" Jordan perked up instantly. "Fries?" "Probably fries." "Let's go." They pulled into Harper's Diner, a small roadside place with a neon sign flickering against the mid-morning sun. Half the parking lot was filled with battered pickup trucks. A few older men stood outside near their vehicles, arms crossed, conversations pausing as the Coleman family stepped out. Jordan, oblivious, grabbed his parents' hands and skipped toward the door. A bell jingled as they entered. The diner fell quieter, not silent, but thin, strained. Danielle felt the shift like a physical weight. A few customers stared too long. A couple whispered. Jordan didn't notice. He was too busy scanning the menu shaped like a cartoon cow. A waitress approached, young, blonde hair tied back, smile tight as a zipper. "Welcome to Harper's," she said. "Can I get y'all something to drink?" "Sprite, please," Jordan chirped. "Water," Danielle added. "Coffee for me," Andre said, keeping his tone neutral, professional, and calmly observant. The waitress jotted their order quickly, too quickly, and walked away without her smile reaching her eyes. Danielle exhaled slowly. Andre didn't look at her, but she felt his hand slide across the table, finding hers under the surface. His grip was warm, steady, reassuring. Jordan flipped over the kids' menu. "Hey, Mom! They've got pancakes shaped like a bear! Look!" Danielle forced a smile. "That looks amazing, baby." But beneath the table, Andre's jaw clenched. Whispers floated from the booth behind them, muffled words she couldn't decipher, but she knew the tone. Anyone black in America knew that tone. The air felt sharper, colder, like the room had shifted around them. Jordan didn't notice at first, but halfway through coloring his menu, he looked up. "Why's that man staring at us?" he asked softly. Danielle froze. Andre's fingers tightened around hers. Before she could answer, the waitress returned with their drinks, placing them down so quickly that condensation splashed onto the table. The food came even faster, almost rushed, as though they were being ushered through an invisible exit. They ate quietly, tense but pretending for Jordan's sake. Danielle kept trying to laugh, trying to talk about the pool, the mountains, the resort's big waterfall. Jordan brightened again at the mention of swimming, excitement bubbling back to the surface. When the check came, Andre paid with calm composure, his expression controlled even when he overheard a man mutter, "Used to be places decent folks could eat." Danielle's hand shook as she grabbed her purse. Andre placed a steadying palm on her back. "We're leaving," he said. "Let's go enjoy our vacation." They walked out as a family, strong, proud, unbroken. But the bruise of that moment settled deep. If only they knew how much darker things would get. By late afternoon, they arrived at Blue Ridge Summit Resort in Asheville. The mountains rose behind it like guardians of an old world, their peaks dusted with faint mist. The resort was undeniably beautiful, glass windows reflecting the lake, manicured lawns, luxury cars parked in neat rows. Jordan gasped. "We're staying here?" Danielle smiled. "Yes, baby." He threw his arms around both of them. "This is the best day ever." At the front desk, the hotel clerk, a woman in her 30s with a crisp uniform and carefully practiced smile, checked their reservation. But something in her expression shifted when she saw them. Her gaze flicked between their faces and the computer screen, lingering too long, analyzing too much. "Welcome to Blue Ridge Summit," she said. "I have your reservation here, Mr. Coleman." The pause on "your" wasn't obvious to anyone untrained, but Andre heard it. He always heard it. Still, he handed over his credit card and ID. "Thank you." While she clicked through the reservation, Jordan leaned his chin on the counter. "Is the pool big? Does it have a slide?" The clerk's smile thinned. "It's adequate." Adequate. Danielle swallowed a frown. Moments later, they received their room keys with a warning. "Our pool rules are strictly enforced, for all guests." The implication wasn't subtle. The Colemans rode the elevator in strained silence until Jordan pointed out the glass window overlooking the lake. "Look, it's huge." Andre forced a smile. "Yeah, champ, it is." They reached their room on the 4th floor, a spacious suite with a view so beautiful it almost washed away the tension. Jordan ran straight to the window and pressed his hands to the glass. "Can we go swimming now, please?" Danielle smiled despite everything. "Let's unpack first." Andre scanned the room instinctively, the corners, the vents, the windowsill. Old habits die hard, especially when the world taught him over and over that black families didn't get to relax the way others did. He pushed the thoughts away. This week was supposed to heal them. This was supposed to be good. This was supposed to be safe. But already the world outside their door was beginning to whisper something else. Something darker, something waiting, something they never imagined would nearly destroy them. The first night at Blue Ridge Summit should have been simple. After they finished unpacking, the Colemans decided to explore. Jordan marched ahead of his parents down the carpeted hallway, his little sandals squeaking softly, his energy rebounding now that the long drive was over. "Slow down, champ," Andre called lightly. "I just want to see everything," Jordan replied, but he slowed just enough to satisfy them, still bouncing as he walked. The resort was undeniably beautiful. Crystal chandeliers gleamed above polished floors. Framed photographs of the Blue Ridge Mountains and the lake hung on the walls, all soft blues and golds. Wealth moved quietly through the lobby, wrapped in linen shirts, summer dresses, and golf polos. But as they passed, the pattern was impossible to ignore. Andre noticed how couples pulled slightly closer together, how some guests pretended not to watch, their eyes flicking toward the family in the reflections of glass doors and windows, how a few smiles came too quickly, too tightly, as if to say, "See? I'm not like them," while their body language betrayed their discomfort. Danielle felt it too. The silence between whispers, the way the only black employees seemed to be in housekeeping uniforms or pushing carts stacked with towels. She caught eyes with an older black man wearing a name tag that read maintenance. He gave her a subtle nod. It wasn't a greeting. It was recognition. A quiet, "I see you. I know." "Look, Mom." Jordan pressed his face to a towering window. "The pool!" Below them, the outdoor pool stretched wide and glittering, the water catching the last of the evening light. A waterfall feature spilled into one section. There were cabanas, hot tubs, and loungers with crisp white towels. It looked like something from a travel ad. "Can we go swimming now?" he pleaded, his voice breathless with wonder. Danielle's heart squeezed. "Not tonight, baby. We still need to eat dinner. Tomorrow morning, okay? First thing." He groaned dramatically. "But I was built for the water." Andre laughed. "You were built to finish your food before you start complaining about swimming." They made their way to the resort restaurant, a space lined with floor-to-ceiling windows facing the darkening lake. Candles flickered on each white-draped table. A hostess greeted them with a professional smile that faltered for half a second when she saw who the smile had to be for. "Table for 3, Andre said. "Of course," the hostess replied. "Right this way." They followed her to a table near the windows. Jordan swung his legs under his chair, eyes scanning the menu. "They have mac and cheese," Danielle said, pointing to the kids' section. "And grilled chicken, and mac and cheese," Jordan decided instantly. "Please, and chocolate milk. Please." "We'll see," Danielle replied. As she glanced up, she noticed Andre's gaze wasn't on the menu. His eyes were on the bar. 2 men sat there, their posture and energy making them stand out even in casual resort attire. One was older, thick-necked, with a hardened, weathered face and pale, cold eyes. His jaw carried the kind of tension that never left, even at rest. The other was younger, stockier, his movements restless, his aggression simmering just beneath the surface. Both had that unmistakable law enforcement bearing. Hips weighted from years of carrying guns, backs straight from academy drills, eyes always scanning. The older one looked familiar. Andre stared, puzzle pieces clicking together in his mind. He'd seen that face in briefing slides months earlier. Sergeant Dale Rourke, a local officer mentioned in internal FBI chatter. Excessive force complaints, civil rights concerns, cases that went nowhere. Beside him, the younger man tipped back his drink with a swagger that screamed, "I'm untouchable." They both were watching the Coleman family. Not curious, not casually, watching. Danielle noticed too. She leaned closer. "You know them?" Andre's voice was low. "The older one, Rourke. He's been on our radar." Jordan was busy tracing the outline of a mountain scene printed on the kids' menu. "Dad, what's house mashed potatoes? Do they live here?" he asked. "It just means they make them fresh," Andre said, eyes still on the bar. "Or at least, that's what they say." Their server arrived, a young white woman with a kind face that softened some of the tension. Her smile faltered when she noticed the officers staring in their direction, but she turned back to the Colemans with renewed focus. "Good evening," she said. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" they ordered. Jordan got his chocolate milk. For a few moments, they fell into a rhythm, discussing the lake, tomorrow's pool time, whether they'd rent a paddle boat, and whether Jordan was tall enough for the zip line. It almost felt normal. But at the bar, Rourke and Officer Brent Harlow kept glancing over, murmuring to each other. Harlow's smile twisted when he looked at them. Something sharp and mean curled at the edges. Andre kept his back straight, his face relaxed, his gestures easy, but Danielle could feel the tension underneath. Every time Jordan laughed a little too loudly, she saw Rourke's eyes flare with irritation. Every time Danielle's hand brushed Andre's, she felt his fingers flex just slightly, like a lion forced to sit still. Their food arrived. A perfectly grilled steak for Andre, roast chicken with vegetables for Danielle, and a steaming bowl of mac and cheese for Jordan that he declared almost as good as Mom's. Danielle tried. She really did. She asked about his favorite cartoons, reminded him to slow down when he ate too fast, and teased him about needing to drink water. But her gaze kept drifting to the bar, to the officers' smirks, to their cold appraisal. When they finished eating, Andre signed the check for the room. As they stood, a burst of low laughter came from the bar. "Figures," one of the men muttered, "just loud enough to carry." Andre didn't turn around. He placed a steady hand on Jordan's shoulder instead, guiding his son and wife toward the exit. Danielle kept her chin up, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. Still, she felt it. That familiar, aching question. Will we ever be allowed to just be? Night wrapped itself around the resort. Their room glowed warm, the lake below a dark mirror flecked with bits of reflected light. Jordan lined up his new shark print swim trunks and red goggles on a chair as if the items might run away in the night without supervision. "They're ready for tomorrow," he announced proudly. Danielle smiled from the bed. "So are we." "Can I sleep in the big bed with you guys? Just for the first night? It's a special vacation," he pleaded. Andre and Danielle exchanged a look. They both knew he was old enough for the pull-out sofa, but they also knew what the day had felt like. The diner, the lobby, the restaurant, the officers at the bar. Andre nodded. "Just for tonight," he said. "Family cuddle night." Jordan dove under the covers like a small rocket, wedging himself happily between them. After the lights went out, the room fell quiet. The soft whoosh of the air conditioning, the faint hush of waves against the shore. Somewhere in the distance, a car door is closing. A hallway door is opening and shutting. Andre lay awake longer than the others, his arm draped over his son, fingers brushing Danielle's. His mind replayed every look from that day. He had promised himself, promised them, no work on this trip. But the job had a way of finding him anyway. Morning sunlight slipped through the curtains in strips of gold. Jordan woke before anyone else, his body already buzzing with the thought of water. He wriggled free from the blankets and scampered to where his trunks and goggles waited. "Mom? Dad, wake up! Pool time!" Danielle laughed sleepily, checking the clock. It was barely past 8. She pushed herself up, stretching, her body still tired from the drive. Okay, let me get ready." Andre swung his legs over the side of the bed. Unlike Jordan, he wasn't eager for the day. He stood at the mirror adjusting a tie, buttoning a crisp shirt. "Wait," Jordan said, pausing mid-bounce. "You're putting on your work clothes." Andre forced a small smile. "I just need to take care of a few quick things in town. I'll meet you two at the pool later. Promise." Danielle knew what a few quick things meant. A phone call he couldn't ignore. A thread he needed to pull. Something in his instincts had been triggered, and part of him couldn't let it go. "Are you sure?" she asked quietly as Jordan searched for his flip-flops. Andre stepped close, lowering his voice. "I'll just check in with the field office, run a couple of names, then I'm done. I swear, Danny, I need to know what we're dealing with." She swallowed, then nodded. "Okay, just be careful." He kissed her forehead, then Jordan's. "I'll see you two by the water. Save me a chair." After he left, Danielle packed the pool bag with the precision of someone preparing for both a picnic and a battle. Towels, sunscreen, extra clothes, water bottles, snacks, a paperback book she knew she wouldn't really read. In the elevator, Jordan practically danced in place. "We're really going to go in the big pool? The one with the waterfall?" "Yes," Danielle said, putting on her best soft teacher voice. "But remember the rules. No running, no diving in the shallow end. Stay where I can see you. And tell me if anyone makes you uncomfortable, okay?" Jordan nodded solemnly, then brightened again. "Okay, got it." The pool area was quiet when they stepped outside. A few older couples occupied lounge chairs, sipping coffee and reading newspapers. Two women swam gentle laps in the far lane. The air smelled of chlorine and sunscreen and freshly cut grass. Danielle chose a pair of chairs in a sunny spot where she could see the entire pool clearly. She spread out towels, set down the bag, and handed Jordan his goggles. "Can I go in now?" he asked, already halfway out of his sandals. "Yes." "Slowly," she said. "Step in. Don't jump, and remember, stay where you can stand." "Yes, ma'am." He made his way to the shallow end, sliding into the water via the steps, his face lighting up as the cool water wrapped around him. He moved with the confident strokes of a kid who had been born loving the pool. A few older guests smiled at his obvious joy. Danielle sat back, pulling out her book but reading only the same sentence over and over. Her eyes kept flicking back to Jordan. He splashed around, practiced underwater flips, and popped back up grinning. For a brief stretch of time, it felt almost normal. About 15 minutes later, a young staff member in a polo shirt walked toward her. His smile was stiff, professional, and half-hearted. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said. "Can I see your room key? Just a routine check." Danielle blinked, her eyes sliding quickly over the rest of the pool area. No one else was being approached. The older couple with matching hats. The two women in caps are doing laps. The man was half asleep with sunglasses on. Just her. "Of course," she said, keeping her voice level. She rummaged through the bag, found the key card, and handed it to him. He glanced at it for barely a second before nodding. "Thank you, Mrs. Coleman. Enjoy your stay." She watched him walk away. He didn't stop at any other chair. Jordan swam closer. "What did he want?" "Nothing, baby," she said. "Just checking." He nodded, then swam back out, beginning a game with another boy who had arrived with his mother, a white kid about the same age. They took turns seeing who could stay underwater the longest. Danielle tried to read again. The words blurred. Her stomach tightened. That's when she saw them. The same officers from the restaurant. Sergeant Dale Rourke and Officer Brent Harlow emerged from the men's changing room in swim trunks and resort-branded T-shirts. Their tans were sharp lines from short-sleeved uniform shirts. Sunglasses hung from their collars. They scanned the pool with a predator's casual interest before their eyes landed squarely on her and Jordan. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. They didn't go into the water. They didn't walk to the bar. They chose two loungers directly opposite Danielle's chairs, sitting where they had a clear, unobstructed view of her and her son. Harlow leaned forward, elbows on knees. Rourke sprawled back, legs open, a calculated display of dominance. Danielle's heartbeat quickened. She adjusted her position, forcing her features into a mask of relaxed neutrality. "You are a woman with every right to be here," she told herself. "You are a paying guest. You are not going to move." Jordan laughed, splashing with his new friend. The other boy's mother watched nervously from a few chairs away. She caught Danielle's eye and offered a tight, apologetic smile before calling her son over. "Come on, baby," the woman said. "Time to go inside." "But, Mom—" "Now." The boy obeyed, glancing back at Jordan with an awkward wave. Jordan's face fell when he realized his playmate was gone. "Mom!" he called, floating near the middle. Where'd he go? Danielle raised her voice just enough. They probably had somewhere to be, baby. Keep playing. I'm watching. She clapped when he attempted an underwater somersault. Her claps felt hollow, her smile strained. Rourke and Harlow stayed, watching, waiting. The older couple packed up their things and left. The two lap swimmers climbed out and headed toward the spa. Within minutes, the pool area was nearly empty except for Danielle, Jordan, and the two officers. Their presence was a weight pressing on her chest. She could have left. She could have told Jordan, "That's enough for today." She could have given in to the rising fear. Instead, she stayed seated, back straight, chin high, one hand resting on the arm of the chair, the other clutching the edge of her towel. She refused to surrender this space. After another 10 minutes, Jordan swam to the edge, water streaming down his face, his chest heaving with happy exertion. "I'm hungry," he said. "Can we get a snack?" "Yes," Danielle replied, beginning to rise. "Let's dry off and—" She didn't finish. The officers were already on their feet. They approached with deliberate steps, not rushed, not friendly, the kind of walk that said, "We've decided something about you, and you're going to feel it." "Ma'am," Rourke said as they got close, voice drenched in false politeness, "we're going to need to see some identification." His tone carried across the water, turning heads from the balconies above. Phones lifted, some subtly, some not. "And your room key," Harlow added, rocking on his heels, "just to verify you're supposed to be here." Jordan's wet hand gripped Danielle's arm. Water dripped from his trunks onto her legs. He could feel the tension in her body now, the quiver in her muscles, the sharpness in her breathing. Danielle's face burned under the stares. "I already showed my room key to your staff member less than an hour ago," she said, willing her voice to stay steady. "He confirmed everything was fine." "Well, now you can show it to us," Rourke replied, his smile never reaching his eyes. "Along with some ID, unless there's a problem." Jordan's fingers dug in. Danielle took a slow breath. She didn't want to escalate. She didn't want her son to see her shake. "I have both right here," she said, reaching carefully into the bag with one hand while keeping the other protectively around Jordan's shoulders. She pulled out her wallet and key card, extending them toward Rourke. He snatched them from her, examining them with exaggerated scrutiny, turning her driver's license over as if it might reveal a secret under a different light. His lip curled faintly. "These could be fake," he announced, voice louder now, making sure the people on the balconies could hear. "We've had issues with certain people trying to sneak in." "They're not fake," Danielle replied, her heart pounding against her ribs. "We checked in yesterday. Your front desk confirmed—" "Listen here," Harlow cut in, stepping closer, his jaw clenched. The mask of politeness dropped. "This place is for the right kind of guests. We've had enough of your kind causing trouble." Gasps rippled from above. Phones rose higher. Jordan pressed himself into Danielle's side, his small body shaking against her. "My kind?" Danielle repeated, her voice cracking but rising. "We are paying guests, just like everyone else here. My son is just trying to swim." Rourke's hand shot out, gripping her upper arm with a force that made her wince. "That's it," he said. "You're leaving. Now." "Don't touch my mom," Jordan cried, grabbing her other arm, tears mixing with pool water on his cheeks. "Let go of me," Danielle demanded, trying to pull away. "You're hurting me." Harlow moved behind them, blocking their path, his posture aggressive. "Move, or we'll make you move." The hotel staff lingered at the edges, frozen. No one stepped in. No one told the officers to stop. No one said, "This is wrong." Danielle looked up at the balconies, at the lenses pointed down. Strangers watching. Some outraged, some entertained, none close enough to help. "I said let go," she repeated, her voice shaking but louder now. You have no right. Every right, Rourke snarled, squeezing harder. Stop making a scene, Jordan sobbed. Please don't hurt my mom. Please. His cries were no longer just scared. They were breaking. And then, a voice cut through the chaos. Deep, controlled, sharp as a blade. Take your hands off my wife, now. The world seemed to pause for half a heartbeat. Rourke looked up. Danielle turned. Jordan's head whipped around, tears still clinging to his lashes. Andre stood at the edge of the pool deck, suit jacket gone, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. His eyes were dark with something cold and dangerous. He didn't shout. He didn't rush. He walked toward them with steady, measured steps. And every person with a camera knew instinctively something had just shifted. Harlow moved first. Back off, he snapped, puffing himself up. This doesn't concern you. Andre's gaze didn't waver. That's my wife. That's my son. It concerns me more than anything in this world. Harlow shoved him in the chest. It was a mistake. Andre moved with terrifying precision. Years of training compressed into a single fluid motion. He caught Harlow's wrist, twisted, and redirected his force. The younger officer stumbled, half-spun, dropping to one knee with a strangled yelp as his arm was locked behind his back. Rourke released Danielle, lunging toward Andre with a snarl. Andre sidestepped, using Rourke's own momentum to send him crashing into a nearby lounge chair. The chair skidded sideways, clattering against the concrete. Guests gasped. Someone screamed. Jordan clung to Danielle, but his eyes, wide and terrified, never left his father. Harlow scrambled up, rage contorting his face. He reached into the pocket of his swim trunks and pulled out a collapsible baton, snapping it open with a metallic crack. "Drop it," Andre ordered, his voice ringing across the open space. "Don't make this worse." Harlow swung. Andre blocked with his forearm, gritting his teeth against the impact. He grabbed Harlow's wrist again, applying precise pressure to a nerve point. The baton clattered to the ground as Harlow howled, dropping to his knees once more. Andre kicked the baton out of reach without taking his eyes off either man. He reached into his back pocket, pulled out something small and worn, and held it up. "Federal agent!" His voice boomed, clear and commanding. "Andre Coleman, FBI! Both of you, stand down, right now!" Silence fell. Every phone, every eye, every breath was on him. Rourke froze halfway to his feet, his face draining of color. Harlow stopped struggling, shock spreading over his features. From the glass doors leading back into the hotel, the resort manager hurried outside, flanked by 2 security guards. Her name tag read Margaret Lewis, and her professional smile was nowhere in sight now. Her eyes darted from the crying child to the scattered chairs to the baton lying on the ground. What is going on here?" she stammered. Andre didn't lower his badge. "These officers," he said, voice clipped but vibrating with contained rage, "physically assaulted my wife and tried to forcibly remove my family from the pool based solely on our race. Then they attacked me when I intervened." Murmurs surged through the growing crowd. Guests on balconies called down, confirming what they'd seen. One older woman pointed her phone toward the scene and shouted, "I got all of it!" Jordan clutched Danielle's waist like a lifeline, his body still shaking. Danielle stood taller now, bruises forming on her arm, tears shining in her eyes. She wasn't hiding them anymore. She wasn't hiding anything. The truth was out in the open, blazing under the summer sun. And there was no going back. The suite that had felt luxurious only hours before now felt like a fragile shell, something that could barely protect them. Andre stood near the window, muscles tight, eyes scanning the pool deck below, as if expecting Rourke and Harlow to reappear at any moment. Jordan sat curled on the couch, wrapped in a towel, his cheeks streaked with dried tears. Danielle sat beside him, stroking his back gently, though her own hands still trembled. The resort felt different now, smaller, less welcoming. Every shadow held possibility. Every sound in the hallway made them flinch. Jordan sniffled. "Dad, are they going to come back?" Andre turned immediately. He crouched down so he was eye level with his son. "No," he said, steady and sure. "Not while I'm here. Not while you're here with us. Do you hear me? You're safe with us." Jordan nodded, but uncertainty lingered in his eyes, the kind of hesitation that should never exist in a child so young. A soft knock sounded at the door. Danielle jolted. Andre rose slowly, quietly motioning them both to stay put. He moved silently to the peephole, tension radiating from every line of his body. A hotel employee stood there, a young woman holding a tray with bottles of water and a small fruit plate. Her hands fidgeted nervously as if she wasn't sure she should be there. Andre cracked the door just enough to speak through it. "Yes?" "Compliments of the manager," the woman said softly, her gaze flickering to the bruises on Danielle's arm behind him. "She asked me to bring these. She wanted to apologize." Her tone made it clear she didn't believe an apology mattered. Andre hesitated, then took the tray. "Thank you." The moment she walked away, he locked the door, bolted it, and slid on the security bar. Danielle exhaled shakily. "I want to go home." It wasn't weak. It wasn't surrender. It was the voice of a mother whose safety, dignity, and sense of belonging had been shattered. Andre walked over, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "We will, if that's what you want. But if we leave now, they'll bury this. They'll say we were the problem." Danielle's eyes brimmed. "I don't care what they say." Andre softened. I know. But I care what happens to the next family who walks through those doors." Jordan tugged at Danielle's sleeve, his small voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, does this mean we can't swim tomorrow?" The innocence in the question struck her harder than any officer's grip. She kissed his forehead. "Baby, we'll see. Okay? We'll see." Night crept into the room slowly, carrying with it a suffocating heaviness. Jordan fell asleep on the pull-out couch, his tiny body curled protectively, like even in dreams he was trying to shield himself. Danielle changed into soft pajamas but kept her cardigan on, as if she needed the extra layer between her and the world. Andre stood barefoot near the window again, phone against his ear. His voice was low and clipped, carrying that tone Danielle associated with the worst of his cases. "Officer misconduct. Yes, I have them on video. No, I'm not giving any interviews yet. I need confirmation on their disciplinary history, and any complaints filed that mysteriously disappeared." He paused. "Understood." He hung up, jaw tightly set. Danielle watched him. "What did they say?" Andre rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Exactly what I expected. The department has no record of any recent complaints against Rourke or Harlow." "Because they delete them," Danielle muttered, bitterness edging her voice like broken glass. "Of course they do." Andre moved to sit beside her. He took her hand, fingers intertwining. "I promise you, they will not bury this." A sudden noise made them both jump, something scraping lightly against the carpet just outside their suite. Andre shot to his feet. Another sound, paper sliding, then footsteps. Quick, someone walking away. Andre reached the door in 2 strides, checking the peephole. The hallway was empty. A thin piece of paper lay partly tucked under the door. Danielle's breath hitched. "Andre, don't just grab it." He nodded, slipping a napkin around the paper so he wouldn't smear any prints. He lifted it slowly, carefully, his eyes scanning every inch. A few words stared back at them in all caps block letters. "Get out while you can." Danielle's hand flew to her mouth. Jordan shifted in his sleep but didn't wake. Andre's face darkened, something primal rising behind his eyes. Not anger, something deeper, a cold, terrifying protectiveness. He placed the note on the table like a piece of evidence in a crime lab. "That's it," Danielle whispered. "We're leaving. We're done. I won't stay in a place where people slip threats under our door." Andre stepped toward her, placing both hands on her shoulders. "Danny, if we leave, they win. They get to keep doing this. They get to hurt other people." She shook her head, tears falling freely. "I don't care about winning, Andre. I care about our son. I care about sleeping tonight without wondering who's outside our door. I care about living long enough to watch him grow up." Andre closed his eyes. Hearing those words, those raw truths, cut through the last strands of his restraint. He knelt down beside her. "I promise you, nothing will happen to you or Jordan. Nothing." "But can you really promise that?" she whispered. It was the only question he didn't have an answer for. Jordan woke from a nightmare around midnight, crying quietly. Danielle gathered him into her arms, rocking him gently as if he were much younger. "Mom, he grabbed you," Jordan said, voice shaking. "Why did he grab you?" Danielle swallowed the lump in her throat. "Because he was wrong, baby. Very, very wrong. But Daddy stopped him. And Daddy will always stop people who try to hurt us." Jordan pressed his face into her chest. "He was so mean." "I know," she whispered, pressing a kiss to his head. "But you're safe now." He sniffled. "Can I sleep in your bed again?" "Yes, yes, of course." They moved the couch cushions and blankets to the center of the suite's floor, making a shared sleeping space. Andre arranged everything with precision, pillows aligned, blankets tight, while checking the windows and door repeatedly. They all lay down together, Jordan between them, Danielle on one side, Andre on the other. But even as Jordan fell asleep, Danielle remained awake, listening to every sound in the hallway, every distant door, every soft thump. Her heart pounded steadily, relentlessly, like it didn't trust the silence. Andre lay on his back, staring at the ceiling, one arm protectively draped across both of them. His phone rested in his hand, just in case. Hours passed. 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3:12 a.m. Somewhere in the early morning, the thin, ghost-like hours before dawn, there was a sound, not loud, soft, a shuffle, a murmur, the rustling of leaves outside their window. Jordan stirred. Danielle froze. Andre sat up instantly. He moved to the window in near silence. The courtyard below was dark, illuminated only by a single flickering lamp, just enough light to reveal tracks. Footprints pressed into the soft patch of garden soil directly beneath their room. Fresh, new, leading up to the wall. Danielle's breath came in sharp, uneven bursts. Who did that?" Andre didn't answer right away. He knelt, checking the window latch. Then the frame. Then the lock. Locked. Still, the tracks were real. Someone had stood directly below their window in the middle of the night. Watching. Waiting. Testing. Jordan whimpered in his sleep. Danielle gathered him closer. Andre finally spoke. "I'm calling security." Security arrived quickly, but not urgently. A lone guard walked the courtyard, glanced half-heartedly at the footprints, and shrugged. "Probably maintenance," he said. "They walk through here sometimes." "At 3 in the morning?" Andre asked. The guard shrugged again. "Sometimes." He left before either of them could ask another question. As the door closed behind him, Danielle whispered, "They don't care." Andre shook his head. "No, they're covering something." He looked again at the footprints. Someone had come close. Too close. By dawn, the three of them had barely slept. They pushed the furniture aside and left their makeshift bed on the floor, too exhausted to put anything back. Jordan stared at cartoons with dark circles under his eyes. Danielle stood by the curtains, staring out at the peaceful lake that mocked them with its serenity. Andre paced, running a hand over his hair. Security is either incompetent or complicit, or both. What do we do? Danielle asked. Andre glanced at Jordan, then lowered his voice. There's more going on here than just two racist cops. I need to talk to other staff, look at their security feeds, talk to locals. Someone knows something. Danielle exhaled slowly. Jordan can't stay cooped up in this room all day. He needs something normal. The amusement park, she said suddenly. The one we passed on the way in. Andre hesitated. Alone? No one will target a mother and her son at an amusement park, she said. Not in broad daylight. And Jordan needs a day to be a kid again. Andre looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the steel beneath her fear. He nodded. Okay. Stay in public spaces. Don't go anywhere isolated. Keep your phone on. Check in every hour. She squeezed his hand. I will. Jordan brightened a little when she told him the plan. Really? Roller coasters? Yes, baby, roller coasters. Andre knelt in front of him. And you stay with Mom the whole time. Hold hands when she says. Stay in crowds. No wandering. Understand? Jordan nodded earnestly. I promise, Dad. Good, Andre said, pulling him into a tight hug. I love you. Danielle watched them, emotions swelling in her chest. Love, fear, gratitude, exhaustion. It was all tangled together. Before they walked out the door, Andre stopped them. His voice was low, soft, almost fragile. Danny, if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you call me. I'll be there before anyone touches you, okay? She nodded. Okay. But when the door closed behind them, when Andre was left alone in the suite with nothing but silence and fear and the note on the table, the weight of what they were up against settled heavily on his shoulders. He looked again at the paper. Get out while you can. Someone wanted them gone. Someone was warning them or threatening them. And Andre knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was no longer a poolside incident. This was something deeper, something darker, something that had been thriving in this town for far too long. And now that he'd stepped into it, now that he'd seen it, there was no turning back. Not without justice. Not without truth. Not without protecting his family with everything he had. Even if the cost was more than he ever imagined, the amusement park should have been loud enough to drown out fear. Colorful rides rose into the sky, twisting against the bright blue. Music boomed from speakers. Children shrieked with joy. Cotton candy spun in the air like clouds turned to sugar. And yet, for Danielle, something felt off. She held Jordan's hand tightly as they walked past the ticket booth. His steps were eager, trying desperately to reclaim the happiness that had been stripped from him. But she felt the way he looked around too often, how he held her hand not with childish looseness, but with quiet desperation. Mom, he whispered, tugging her hand. Can we go on the spinning teacups first? She forced a smile. Of course we can, baby. She bought the wristbands, guided him toward the colorful ride, and watched him laugh again, as if the pool incident were fading into something distant. Not gone, not healed. Just pushed down far enough to let joy breathe again. And for a moment, Danielle let herself breathe too. But then she noticed him. A security guard near the concession stand, standing unnaturally still, staring directly at her. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't scanning the crowd like a normal security guard. His walkie-talkie was raised slightly toward his mouth, but he didn't speak. It was more like he was listening. Jordan waved. Mom, look at me! Look! Look! He spun in a dizzy circle, giggling, his arms out. Danielle clapped, but her eyes flicked back toward the guard. His gaze had not left her. A cold sensation crept up her spine. No, not here, not now. She told herself it meant nothing. She told herself she was imagining things. She told herself, but she knew. When Jordan climbed out of the teacup, she held him close. Let's get a snack." They went to a small concession stand. The woman behind the counter, a middle-aged white worker, smiled at Jordan's enthusiasm for a pretzel. But when Danielle handed over her cash, the woman's smile vanished, replaced by something tight and dismissive. She placed the change on the counter, not in Danielle's outstretched hand. Jordan watched, confusion flickering across his face. "Mom?" he whispered. "It's okay, baby." But everything in her chest screamed that it wasn't. When they sat for lunch at a picnic table, Jordan leaned in. "Mom, those people over there, why are they taking pictures of us?" Danielle turned. A small group nearby, a man and woman both wearing park staff badges, lowered their phones quickly and pretended to talk. Their movements were too quick, too guilty. Her stomach twisted. Tourists took pictures of rides, mascots, funnel cakes, not random black families trying to eat in peace. Jordan stared at his food without touching it. "Mom, are they mad at us?" "No, honey," she said automatically. No. But even she knew the lie tasted sour. Jordan's earlier spark dimmed again, the same way it had dimmed at the diner, at the pool, at dinner. Piece by piece, strangers were stealing his joy. Danielle stood abruptly. "Come on, let's walk." She needed air. She needed space. She didn't even know what she needed. Jordan reached for her hand again without being asked. They walked toward the carousel, where the music played a cheerful song that suddenly felt eerie. Shadows moved in the corner of her vision. Every unfamiliar face felt threatening. Every whisper felt directed at her. When the carousel slowed, she lifted Jordan onto a painted horse. He smiled for her, for a moment. But Danielle felt someone behind her. She turned slightly. The same security guard from earlier was at the railing, watching her. Not Jordan, her. She pulled out her phone and sent Andre a text with trembling thumbs. "Something's wrong. Someone is watching us. Please call me when you can." Andre's reply came in seconds. "Where are you? Who? Are you safe?" She typed quickly. "Amusement park. Staff security. People taking pics. Just get back soon. Please." He responded again immediately. "I'm leaving the hotel now. Stay near crowds. Stay visible. I'm on my way." She swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay calm. "Mom," Jordan whispered, "I don't like it here." She kissed his forehead. "We're going home soon." But in a small town like Ridgeway Creek, where the police, the resort, and now even the amusement park staff seemed connected by the same quiet hostility, home felt very far away. Meanwhile, Andre had not had a peaceful morning of his own. After Danielle and Jordan left, Andre took the elevator down to the lobby, intentionally choosing a long route that allowed him to pass through public spaces where staff couldn't claim they didn't see him. He approached the front desk. The young clerk who had checked them in swallowed visibly when Andre approached. "Can I help you, sir?" Andre placed his palms gently on the counter. "Yes. I have a few questions about your security protocols last night." The clerk faltered. "Security protocols?" "Yes," Andre repeated. "Your cameras, your hallway access. Who can come near our suite at night? And who on your staff is responsible for monitoring the grounds?" The clerk's fingers shook slightly. I think you should speak with management." "Then get them," Andre said calmly. "Now." The clerk scurried into the back office. A moment later, a supervisor emerged, a stiff, overly polite man with a forced smile. "Sir, our systems are private. If you have concerns about your stay, we encourage you to file a formal complaint with—" "I'm an FBI agent," Andre said, placing his badge on the counter. "And I'm asking you about your security measures because someone left a threatening note under my door last night." The supervisor's face drained of color. "Oh, well, that's troubling." "Troubling," Andre repeated. "Yes, and do you know what else is troubling? The lack of cameras in your third-floor hallway? The side entrances with no active monitoring, the courtyard that's supposed to be locked at night but clearly wasn't. The supervisor's eyes darted around. "Sir, I assure you—" "You assure me nothing." Andre leaned in, his voice low and lethal. "Because everything about this place reeks of someone wanting privacy, to do things they know they shouldn't." The supervisor swallowed hard. We can't discuss the details of our surveillance system." Andre's jaw clenched. "Then I'll find someone who can." He walked away. And that's when he saw them. Outside in the parking lot, near a patrol car, stood Rourke and Harlow, gesturing angrily, jabbing fingers at the resort manager, Margaret Lewis. Even from afar, Andre could sense the tension. They were arguing with her, intimidating her, threatening her. And she, fear etched across her face, was nodding submissively, wringing her hands, backing away as if cornered by wolves. Andre took a step forward, but Margaret suddenly stormed inside, slamming the door behind her, leaving the officers seething. Andre's suspicion sharpened. Something was happening in this town, something coordinated, something sinister, and Rourke and Harlow were at the center of it. He pulled out his phone and called Danielle. She answered quickly, voice tight. "Andre, they're watching us, again." He felt his blood pressure spike. "I'm coming. Stay put. Don't walk anywhere secluded. And keep eyes on Jordan at all times." Her breath trembled through the line. "I will. Just hurry." He hung up and walked straight out the door. At the amusement park, things grew worse. After the carousel ride, Danielle and Jordan grabbed bottled water from a vending machine. Danielle sat with her back toward a wall, the least vulnerable position, Jordan tucked close. They rested for a moment. Then Jordan whispered, "Mom, those kids are pointing at me." Danielle turned. A group of white boys, maybe 8 or 9 years old, stood across the walkway, whispering and snickering. One whispered loudly enough for Jordan to hear. "My dad says we don't play with people like them." Danielle felt her throat close. Jordan's eyes dropped. His shoulders curled inward, shrinking him. "Mom, what does that mean?" He looked up at her, pain flooding his eyes. "Why don't they like me?" Danielle pulled him close, heart shattering. "You did nothing wrong. Nothing. Some people just choose hate over humanity. But you, baby, you're perfect." "But why me?" Jordan whispered. "Why us?" She stroked his cheek. "Because we're different, and because they're afraid of what they don't understand." He wiped his eyes. "I don't want people to be mean to us anymore." Danielle felt tears prick her own eyes. "I know, sweetheart. I know." She hugged him tightly, but every second she spent comforting her son, she felt eyes on her, felt something closing in, felt this town's ugliness tightening its grip around her family. They left the park shortly after. Andre arrived back at the suite just as Danielle and Jordan returned, exhausted and shaken. He pulled them both into his arms without saying a word. Danielle whispered into his shoulder. "It happened again. People are taking pictures, staff staring, parents are pulling their kids away from Jordan. Andre, I've never seen anything like this." Andre cupped her face gently. "You shouldn't have had to." Jordan curled against her side, quiet and defeated. "What's happening to this town?" Danielle whispered. Andre didn't answer immediately. He walked them inside, locked the door, then pulled a chair from the dining table, setting it near the window like a guard post. "They know I'm looking into them," he said finally. "And that scares them." Danielle frowned. "Who?" Andre sighed. "Everyone." He opened his laptop. Folders filled the screen, documents, case files, investigative reports. He clicked through them, his expression growing darker with each one. "I checked every database I could," he said. "The complaints against Rourke and Harlow go back years. Brutality, racial harassment, false reports, tampered evidence." He clicked a tab. And all of them, including the ones that reached the FBI, were marked as closed due to lack of cooperation from local authorities. Danielle's jaw dropped. They covered it up. Andre nodded. And not just the police, the resort, the town council, hospital security, hotel management. They're all tied together. He clicked on another file. This resort has been part of a pattern. Minority families book a stay. They get harassed, pushed out, threatened, forced to leave. He scrolled. Some families filed complaints. Some tried to take legal action. All of them disappeared, dropped, buried. Danielle covered her mouth. Oh my God. And look at this, Andre said. The resort security footage from the pool? Missing. Technical malfunction. The hallway cameras? Disabled. Every blind spot at the hotel is where incidents have happened. Danielle felt her stomach twist. They're working together, she whispered. The resort and the police. Andre nodded. And now they've targeted us, he said. Because I'm an outsider poking around, because I saw something they wanted to hide. Danielle sank onto the couch, pulling Jordan close. So what do we do? She whispered. Andre didn't answer with words. He answered by opening a folder titled Local Victims. The screen filled with names, dozens. One caught Danielle's eye immediately, Marcus Williams. Danielle felt a surge of anger rise like fire. Call him! Andre nodded and dialed. Within moments, Marcus answered, voice trembling but urgent. They put him on speaker. What happened to us happened to you too, didn't it? Danielle asked gently. Marcus exhaled shakily. Yes, last summer, the same officers, the same hotel, the same threats. They cornered my wife at the pool, told her she didn't look like she belonged. When I complained, they made it worse. Police followed us around town. People stared at us like we were criminals. He paused. They threatened our kids. Danielle's breath caught. Threatened? How? Told us they knew which school they went to, Marcus said quietly. That they could visit any time. We packed our bags that night. That's how they want it. Scare you until you leave. But why? Danielle whispered. Because that town feeds off silence, Marcus said. They've been doing this for decades. And they always win. Andre's jaw tightened. Not this time. Marcus's voice broke. I hope you're right. When the call ended, a profound stillness settled over the room. Jordan whispered, Dad, why do they hate us so much? Andre knelt in front of him, voice thick with emotion. They hate us because they're afraid of who we are. But you did nothing wrong. You hear me? Jordan nodded slowly, but his eyes shone with fear. Danielle felt something in her chest break. Her son, the sweetest, kindest child, was learning what racism truly meant, and it was tearing a piece of his innocence away forever. As night fell again, the sweet felt even smaller, even darker. Andre worked late, analyzing documents. Danielle sat beside Jordan as he colored quietly, but every scratch of his crayon felt laden with tension. Around midnight, a soft sound pulled them all to attention. Jordan stood in the doorway to the bedroom, trembling. Mom! Dad! I saw someone at the window, he whispered. Danielle's breath stopped. Andre grabbed his weapon, motioning for them to stay back. He approached the window cautiously. The curtains swayed almost imperceptibly. The wind shouldn't have been strong enough. Andre peered outside. The courtyard below was empty, but the footprints were still there. Fresh. Darker now with moisture. Someone had come again. Someone had stood directly under their window. Again. Danielle wrapped her arms around Jordan, pressing his head to her chest. Jordan's voice shook. Dad, I'm scared. Andre locked every latch, checked every corner, and double-bolted the door. He pulled Danielle and Jordan close. We're not sleeping apart tonight, he said. Not after this. They moved the furniture, made space on the floor, put all the mattresses together. They lay down, Danielle with Jordan in her arms, Andre with his weapon beside him. The room was dark, silent, but their fear was loud. Jordan whispered in the darkness, "Dad, they're not going to get us, right?" Andre brushed a hand over his son's hair. "They'll have to go through me first." Jordan nodded faintly, then whispered the words that split Danielle's heart. "But Dad, they already did." Danielle closed her eyes, fighting tears. Andre's hand trembled. He pulled his family closer. The night felt endless. But deep in the darkness, they all understood the same terrible truth. This was no longer about a pool. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a mistake. It was a system, a machine, a town built to protect itself through fear and silence. And now that they had pushed back, that machine was pushing back harder. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, the fight would begin. And tomorrow, the Colemans would learn just how deep the darkness in Ridgeway Creek truly ran. Morning in the suite came with a heaviness that didn't lift, not even with the sunlight spilling across the carpet in long, warm beams. It was the kind of morning that felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to fall apart. Jordan clung to Danielle's waist as she tried to make breakfast from the fruit they had bought. His small hands never left her shirt. He followed her as she moved, shadowing her every step. He had never been clingy before. Not until this trip. Not until men with badges showed him that even grown-ups could be terrified. Andre watched quietly. His heart tightened each time Jordan flinched at footsteps in the hallway. Danielle's bruises were darker today, angry marks on her delicate skin, reminders of fingers that had no right to touch her. He would never forget her cry as Rourke gripped her arm. He would never forget Jordan's scream, "Don't hurt my mom!" He would never let it happen again. Danielle set down 2 plates of fruit. Jordan didn't touch his. He nudged a strawberry with one finger, pushing it around the plate like a burden too heavy to lift. "Baby," she said gently, "you need to eat." Jordan didn't look up. I don't feel hungry." Andre crouched beside him. "Champ, you need your strength." Jordan's lower lip trembled. "I don't want to stay here anymore." Danielle wrapped him in her arms. His little body fit perfectly against her chest, but he felt heavier now, not physically, emotionally, as if he were carrying fears a child should never have to carry. Andre swallowed hard. "We're leaving today," he said quietly. "I promise you. After one more thing." Danielle looked up sharply. "Andre, I have to finish this," he said softly, but firmly. "I can't leave without the truth, without proof. I can't let them do this to anyone else." Danielle closed her eyes, breathing through the panic. She understood. She hated that she understood. She wanted to run. She wanted to buckle Jordan in the car seat and drive until the mountains were nothing but a memory. But she also knew who her husband was. He was a protector, a soldier for justice, a man who refused to let evil stay hidden in the dark. "You'll be careful," she whispered. "I swear it. And you'll call every hour." "Yes. And you'll come back to us." His voice dipped. "Always." She kissed him deeply, fiercely, with fear wrapped around passion like barbed wire. When he pulled away, Jordan hugged his father's waist. "Don't go too long, Dad." Andre kissed the top of his head. "Never." And then he left the suite, his badge in his pocket, his weapon on his hip, his heart burning with one truth. This town would not break his family, even if it tried. He didn't drive the SUV. It was too noticeable, too easy to track. Instead, he took the resort shuttle into town, where he knew he'd blend in as just another man in sunglasses walking through Asheville's cobblestone streets. He headed straight for the county records office. If the resort, police, and local government were connected, the paper trail would be there, buried but not erased. At the front counter, a bored clerk barely looked up. "Help you?" I'm here on federal business, Andre said calmly, sliding his badge across the desk. I need access to disciplinary records for Officers Rourke and Harlow, and any complaints filed against them. The clerk blinked twice. Federal? Well, those files aren't public. They are now. She hesitated. I'll need my supervisor. Then get them. She scurried to the back office. Andre's pulse remained steady. He had dealt with corruption before. He had stared down men far more powerful than small-town officers with bruised egos. But this felt different. This town didn't fear outsiders. It punished them. Minutes passed. The clerk returned alone, hands trembling. I'm sorry, sir. The archive room, it's closed today. Andre leaned forward. Closed? Yes, for renovations. He held her gaze. Renovations. She flinched under his stare. I'm just doing what they told me. Who told you? She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Andre already knew. He stepped outside and felt the cold chill of eyes on him. Too many. He scanned the street, storefronts, parked cars, pedestrians. Someone was watching. Someone was waiting. His phone buzzed. Danielle, where are you? Everything okay? He typed quickly. Fine. Don't leave the room. Keep the door locked. He slid his phone back in his pocket. And that's when he saw it. A black SUV, tinted windows parked across the street, engine running. His instincts screamed. He turned left, heading toward a pedestrian alley lined with murals and outdoor cafe tables. The SUV followed. He entered a busier area, tourists, families, musicians performing on the sidewalk. The SUV turned again, tracking him, shadowing him, waiting for the moment he was alone. Andre's pulse sharpened. He didn't run. He didn't show panic. He didn't let them know he knew. Instead, he stepped into a crowded cafe and ordered an espresso he didn't want. At the window, he watched. The SUV stopped moving. A man stepped out. Stocky, broad shoulders, short blonde hair. Harlow, dressed in civilian clothes but still carrying the arrogance of a badge like a poison under his skin. Andre's jaw tightened. He pretended to sip his drink. Harlow scanned the street like he was searching for someone. Andre stepped out a back exit, slipping into a narrow alley behind the cafe. He needed answers. He needed to piece together who warned them. He needed to... His phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Meet me behind Ridgeway Clinic. Urgent. I know what they're planning. Andre's heart thudded. The number wasn't saved. Blocked ID. Encrypted route. He typed back, "Who is this?" No reply. He checked the alley again. All clear. He went. The Ridgeway Clinic sat on a small hill overlooking the lake, a modest building with faded paint and a parking lot full of battered cars. Local families came here. People with limited income. People who didn't question authority because authority always punished those who did. Behind the clinic stood a small staff entrance and a cluster of dumpsters. Andre moved cautiously, scanning every blind spot. A woman stepped out of the shadows, medium height, brown skin, dark eyes filled with pain and exhaustion. A hospital badge hung from her pocket. Sharon Miller. Danielle had spoken to her by phone. Andre lowered his weapon. You called me? She nodded, hands trembling. I couldn't let them do this again. Do what? Andre asked evenly. She swallowed. What they did to my husband. Which was? She took a shaky breath. They framed him. Rourke and Harlow. Said he stole medication from the hospital. Said he attacked them when they questioned him. Andre's jaw clenched. And he didn't? No. He was at home, asleep. But they dragged him outside, beat him in our yard, and told him if he opened his mouth, they'd kill him. Andre's blood went cold. They planted pills in his pocket, Sharon whispered, her voice raw. They said he resisted arrest. They said he attacked first. They said he confessed. All lies. She wiped tears. He's still in prison. Andre closed his eyes for a moment. This town protects its own, Sharon said. Anyone who speaks up disappears. My neighbor tried to testify. She moved 2 weeks later. No forwarding address. She took a step closer. You need to see something. She reached into her purse, shaking, and pulled out a small silver flash drive. My husband hid this before they came back, she whispered. Security footage, body cam clips, emergency room logs, videos of them beating people, mostly black men, sometimes women, children. They always found a way to twist it into resisting arrest. Andre took the drive, a cold fury settling into his bones. These are the men who grabbed my wife, he said quietly. Who made my son cry? Who threatened my family? Sharon nodded. And if they know you're investigating them, they won't stop until they silence you. Andre pocketed the flash drive. Then I need to get this to federal custody. You won't make it back to the resort alone, she whispered. They're hunting you. He didn't deny it. I'll draw attention away, she said. Go now. No, Andre said. You'll be a target. I already am, she said. And if I don't help you, I'll regret it forever. She squeezed his hand. Stop them, she whispered. Andre nodded once. Then he turned toward the street and froze. Headlights. A vehicle is speeding toward him. Not just any vehicle. The same black SUV. Andre sprinted toward the trees as the SUV screeched into the lot. The doors flew open. Rourke and Harlow stepped out. Their guns were already drawn. Coleman! Rourke roared. Run! Sharon cried. Andre darted into the woods behind the clinic as bullets ripped into tree trunks, exploding bark into the air. Rourke and Harlow chased him, shouting, laughing, their footsteps pounding behind him. This wasn't an arrest. This was an execution. Andre dodged fallen logs, raced deeper, lungs burning. Sweat stung his eyes. The flash drive weighed in his pocket like a burning secret. He reached a clearing, a dead end, rock walls on all sides. He turned. Rourke emerged first, gun raised. Harlow arrived next, grinning like a predator. Well, now look at this, Rourke snarled. A federal agent all alone. Harlow smirked. You thought you could embarrass us in front of half the resort? Andre's breath came slow, steady. I exposed you. You poked your nose where it didn't belong, Rourke hissed, and now your wife and kid will pay for it. A red haze filled Andre's vision. You touch them, Andre said slowly, and I will bury you myself. Rourke tilted his head. We already touched your wife, remember? Andre moved. Fast. He lunged forward, grabbing the barrel of Rourke's gun, twisting it downward. The gun fired. The bullet hit the dirt. Harlow swung at Andre's head with the butt of his pistol. Andre ducked, swept Harlow's legs with a brutally fast kick. Harlow fell, gun skidding across the clearing. Rourke swung again. Andre blocked, countered, and slammed his elbow into Rourke's jaw. The older officer staggered but didn't fall. They fought like animals, years of corruption against a lifetime of discipline. Rourke grabbed Andre's throat, squeezing. You think you can walk into our town, he snarled, and not pay the price? Andre's vision blurred, but he reached into his pocket, fingers brushing the flash drive, and jammed the metal edge into Rourke's forearm. Rourke howled, releasing him. Andre gasped for air. Harlow lunged again, tackling Andre to the ground, punches landing like sledgehammers. Your kid, Harlow spat between blows, is next. Andre snapped. He twisted, using his hips to flip Harlow onto his back. He punched once, twice, 3 times, for Jordan's tears, for Danielle's bruises, for every family this town destroyed. Harlow groaned, dazed. Rourke staggered to his feet, breathing heavily. You're dead, Coleman. I'll make sure the whole state thinks you snapped, that you attacked us, that you murdered someone. Andre stood, chest heaving. You can't bury the truth forever. Rourke smirked. Watch us. He raised his gun again, but this time, a voice rang out from behind the trees. Drop your weapon! Andre's breath stopped. He turned. Danielle, standing there, phone in her shaking hands, recording everything. He had no idea how long she'd been there. Jordan stood behind her, gripping her shirt, eyes wide with terror. Rourke froze. Harlow sat up, dazed. Danielle's voice shook but carried the weight of 1,000 broken mothers. I have your faces, your voices, every word you just said. Rourke's pale eyes flashed with rage. Turn that off. Step 1 foot closer, she whispered, and the whole world will see what you are. Andre stared at her, shock, love, and terror all tangled inside him. Danielle had come to save him, again, and this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her, a half-dozen resort guests emerged from the trees, phones out, recording. Some had followed her, some had heard the gunshots, some had seen the officers chase Andre into the woods. Rourke and Harlow were trapped. The truth was no longer hidden. It was on camera. It was undeniable. It was over. Andre grabbed Rourke's arm, twisted it, and slammed him face first into the dirt, cuffing him with the officer's own handcuffs. Harlow tried to crawl away, but Andre grabbed him and pinned him down. Danielle kept filming until both men lay restrained, panting, defeated, exposed. And then, sirens, dozens of them. FBI vehicles, state police, ambulances, everything happened at once. Agents swarmed the clearing, weapons drawn, commands shouted. Rourke and Harlow dragged themselves to their feet. Statements taken, phones collected. Sharon Miller was brought safely inside an ambulance. Resort guests giving eyewitness testimony. The chaos felt surreal, but through it all, Andre kept his family close. Jordan cradled in his arms, Danielle holding his trembling hand. When the chaos finally settled, an FBI agent approached. Agent Coleman, he said, looking grim, you just exposed one of the largest civil rights corruption rings in the region. Andre nodded weakly, exhaustion crashing over him. Danielle leaned into him. Jordan clung to his chest. The agent continued. We're taking over the entire town, effective immediately. In the distance, Rourke screamed curses as agents shoved him into a federal vehicle. Harlow sobbed violently, insisting Andre had attacked him. No one believed them. Not anymore. Not after what they did. Not after what the Colemans survived. Andre kissed Danielle's bruised forehead. You saved me, he whispered. She shook her head, tears spilling. No, you saved us. Jordan lifted his tear-streaked face. Dad, are we safe now? Andre wrapped his family in his arms. Yes, he whispered. You're safe. I promise you. But inside, he knew the truth. Some wounds would stay forever. Some scars would never fade. But they survived, and justice, finally, was coming. Morning sunlight washed across the Asheville field office conference room in soft gold, illuminating the stacks of files, screens, and evidence boards that filled the space. It should have felt clinical, sterile, cold, but for Andre, Danielle, and Jordan, it felt like the first truly safe room they had been in since arriving in this town. Federal agents moved quietly around them, reviewing statements, printing transcripts, coordinating with the U.S. Attorney's Office. Every face was focused, determined, appalled. For once, the entire weight of the federal system was pushing with them, not against them. Andre sat with an ice pack pressed gently against the bruise on his temple while a medic checked his ribs. The pain spiked with each breath, but he hardly noticed. His eyes kept drifting to Danielle and Jordan, both wrapped in blankets, sipping warm cocoa brought by a sympathetic agent. Jordan's hands still shook slightly when he lifted his cup. Danielle's knuckles were white around hers. Trauma didn't vanish overnight, but they were safe now. Safe. It was a word Andre hadn't allowed himself to believe until this moment. A woman in a sharp blazer stepped into the room, the deputy director of the FBI's Civil Rights Division. She carried an expression of solemn respect. "Agent Coleman," she said, offering her hand, "you and your family survived something unimaginable, and because of you, we can finally dismantle a system that has hurt people for years." Andre shook her hand, grateful and exhausted. The phone footage, the flash drive, the confessions. She nodded toward the stack of evidence. "It's enough to bring federal civil rights charges, obstruction charges, corruption charges. The list is long." Danielle exhaled shakily. "Will this actually stick? Or will they get away with it again?" The deputy director didn't hesitate. "Ms. Coleman, not this time. Not with what your family brought forward. Not with all these witnesses. Not with years of hidden records finally uncovered." She placed a gentle hand on Danielle's shoulder. "You saved people. More than you know." Danielle's eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't from fear. They were from the release, from the realization that something horrific had birthed something powerful. Jordan curled into his mother's side, and she kissed his forehead. Across the room, an agent called out, "Ma'am, the hotel manager is confessing. She's naming names." Another added, "5 more victims are here to give statements." The deputy director nodded. "It's happening." The dam had broken. Later that afternoon, the Colemans were escorted out a side entrance to avoid the cameras gathering out front. News vans lined the street. Reporters called out questions. Local residents held signs demanding justice. But what made Danielle pause, what made her throat tighten with a quiet ache, was the group of black families standing together on the sidewalk, waiting. Some she recognized from the resort, some she had never seen before. But all of them had been hurt by this place. All of them had been waiting for someone to fight. A woman stepped forward, holding a baby on her hip. "Thank you," she whispered, tears streaking down her face. "You gave the rest of us courage." Andre reached for her hand. "You deserve justice, too," he said softly, "and you'll get it." The woman nodded, closing her eyes as if releasing years of held breath. The Colemans were guided to an unmarked SUV that would take them back home, far from this cursed town, far from the lake, far from the shadows behind their hotel suite door. As they pulled away, Jordan leaned against the window, watching the crowd fade behind them. "Dad?" he whispered. "Yes, champ?" "Why did they hate us so much?" Andre reached back, placing a hand on his son's small shoulder. "Ignorance," he said softly. "Fear. Power they shouldn't have had." Jordan's brow furrowed. "But we didn't do anything." "No," Andre breathed. "You didn't. And you never will have to justify your existence to people like them." "Will they stop now?" Jordan asked. "Yes," Danielle answered firmly, her voice steady for the first time in days. "They will." Andre squeezed her hand. She looked at him and managed a small, tired smile. The kind you only smile when the nightmare is ending, and you're still standing, still breathing, still together. 2 weeks later, the newspaper headline on their kitchen table read, "Federal probe expands into statewide civil rights investigation." Underneath, a photo of Rourke and Harlow in handcuffs being led into the courthouse. No sunglasses, no arrogance, no power. Just 2 men stripped of the shield that had allowed them to terrorize innocent families. Danielle stood at the stove, stirring cocoa while Jordan sat on the counter wearing the Courage Award his school had given him. He wore it everywhere now. Andre walked in wearing a neatly pressed shirt, preparing for the ceremony at FBI headquarters. Danielle turned, admiring him. "You look good," she teased gently. He pulled her into his arms. "You two saved me. I want you standing beside me at that ceremony." Jordan raised his hand. "Can I hold the medal when you get it?" Andre chuckled, ruffling his hair. "It's all yours." They ate breakfast together. Simple eggs and toast, but somehow it tasted more sacred than any meal they'd had in weeks. Every moment felt heavier now. more meaningful. Pain had reshaped them, but love kept them whole. That afternoon, they arrived at their local community pool, the pool that used to make Danielle tense, used to make her scan for lifeguards and security guards and strangers with wandering eyes. But today, it felt different. Families from all backgrounds filled the water. Children splashed in bright swimsuits, parents chatted in clusters, lifeguards watched attentively. No stares, no tension, no dread. Danielle exhaled softly. "It feels peaceful today," Andre nodded. "Because we're home, and because things are changing." Jordan raced toward the water, joining his friends on the diving board. His laughter echoed across the pool deck, light and unburdened, a sound Danielle didn't realize she had missed until tears stung her eyes. Andre wrapped his arm around her waist. "He's healing." "And so are we," she whispered. Lorraine and her husband James arrived a few minutes later. He walked slowly, still adjusting to freedom, but his smile was wide and genuine. He approached Andre, gripping his hand. "Thank you," James said, voice thick, "for giving me my life back." Andre shook his head. "You deserved justice long before we got involved." James placed a hand over his heart. "Because of you, a lot of people are getting a second chance." Lorraine hugged Danielle tightly. "Your bravery lifted an entire community," she whispered. "Don't ever forget that." Danielle closed her eyes, fighting tears. They sat together under the shade of a large umbrella while the children played. The sun dipped lower in the sky, scattering soft orange light across the water. The sounds of laughter and splashing blended with the warm hum of summer. A safe place, a whole family, a community rising. Danielle watched Jordan swim with strong, confident strokes. No fear in his eyes, no trembling in his limbs. Just joy. She leaned her head on Andre's shoulder. "It's over," she whispered. "Maybe not completely," he murmured. "But we're not alone anymore." She smiled, the soft, real kind that comes only after surviving something that should have broken you. Andre inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the past weeks slowly loosen its grip. Sometimes survival wasn't enough. Sometimes survival needed to become something bigger. A movement, a message, a warning, a promise. Jordan climbed out of the pool, hair dripping, face glowing. "Mom, Dad, watch this next dive." They both stood, hands intertwined, watching their son as he prepared to leap. In his small frame, they saw resilience. In his laughter, they heard the echo of victory. In his joy, they felt the truth. Hate didn't win. Corruption didn't win. Fear didn't win. The Colemans had survived darkness and dragged the truth into the light. And the world was watching now, forever changed. Some stories end when the handcuffs close, but this one does not. This one lingers in the chest. It stays in the silence right after the video ends. It sits heavy in the heart because we all know. This wasn't just a story about one family. It's a story about a reality far too many people still live every single day. A mother who was humiliated. A child who learned fear too young. A father who had to become a shield, a warrior, and a witness all at once. And even though justice finally came, the truth is, the trauma, the scars, the memories, they don't just vanish, but neither does courage, neither does community, neither does the fight for accountability. If this story moved you, if it made you angry, heartbroken, hopeful, or simply more aware, don't let that feeling fade. Subscribe to Racist Reality, not for views, not for numbers, but because stories like this must be told, because silence protects injustice, and shining a light exposes it. On Racist Reality, we uncover true stories of racial injustice, police corruption, and the families who refuse to be broken. And trust me, there are many stories waiting for you on the channel right now that you do not want to miss. So before you go, hit subscribe Visit the Racist Reality channel. Watch more, learn more, share more. Because the more we expose, the more we understand, the more we demand change. Thank you for watching. And remember, the fight doesn't end when the video does. It ends when all of us refuse to look away.